Okay, so honestly, completely unrelated to the fact that I am currently taking a break from university and medical school, I've recently been thinking about the things that school has not taught me. So today, I thought I'd share 5 things that I learned from books that school could never teach me. Let's get straight into it. So number one has got to be learning to let small bad things happen, or learning to make mistakes. I love the suggestion of develop the habit of letting small bad things happen, otherwise you will never find the time for the life-changing big things. And I think in school, from a very young age, we are taught clearly to get even the small things very, very well and to do them very well. And even small mistakes will take like negative points. If you skip a step in a math equation, you're just going to kind of completely lose all the points sometimes in the question itself, which I think is completely ridiculous. We get golden stars and we get little pluses above our grades when we go above and beyond and we don't make even the tiniest mistakes. And we are told that getting everything right will be rewarded with, good points, with letters about our good behavior to our parents, with spots at university and getting the life we want. Rather, when we make mistakes or when we get things wrong, this is just universally bad and is something that should be changed immediately. While I don't necessarily think that this is the right way to approach life, and I think books may have a much healthier kind of view of the lessons and the experiences that you can gain from making mistakes. And I think you have a very safe environment within a book to see how the kind of characters mess up their lives and do all these terrible things. I particularly love the phrase that any fool can learn from their own experience. It's only the smart ones that can learn from other people's experience. And I feel as though with books, we are in a way kind of testing ourselves and putting our brains through experiences without having to do them on our own. And more importantly than all, we are kind of shown how when other people make mistakes, they are accepted, things are fine. Somehow they always end up working out in the long term. While in school, I don't think this is a behavior that is encouraged, accepted, or kind of presented in any shape or form. If you're interested in developing these sort of skills, a book I would definitely recommend is Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman, which is a book about the physicist Richard Feynman, and he just messes up so much and makes so many different mistakes, and he's absolutely hilarious, so I would definitely recommend checking that book out. The second thing that I think books teach us so much better than school is emotional intelligence, and what I mean by this particularly is that I find it so funny how no one expects us to kind of discover electricity from the start every single time. No one expects us to discover the laws of physics. We just accept that someone else did the work beforehand, they understood something, let's give this information to the new generation so they can kind of implement it and take it further. We don't discover Pythagoras' theorem all over again. However, when it comes to emotional intelligence, when it comes to things like understanding the consequences of trauma, or understanding our own insecurities, or understanding different forms of attachment, or the way that we kind of process our feelings and think about the world, and all this emotional stuff that is potentially the biggest thing that is going on in our life, is almost never even touched in school at all, which is absolutely ridiculous. We are brought into the world, shoved into social situations, left to deal with people in like school or outside of school, and left to deal with our own minds without any sort of expertise and experience from people in the past on how to kind of make sense of what's going on in our brain. And the funny thing is, we have so much evidence for this already. There's so many, like if you ask a therapist, they know so much about the human brain. Philosophy and psychology know so much about the human brain, but this is made so inaccessible and so difficult to kind of reach and understand as a student, especially in early education and even in later education, unless you are specialized in these subjects. No one ever talks about them. So I find it so frustrating that this is not information that we are given, but we are just left to kind of, I know so many maths formulas that I was given in school that I will absolutely never apply, but I have no clue on how to manage someone's emotions or how to understand what pain or trauma or hurt means for me. I think it's so important to recognize unhealthy coping mechanisms that we may have, and these sort of skills are never taught in school. So therefore, I think reading books where you can read about the inner psychology of characters and how they grow and how they change and how they evolve over different situations, and very often the authors of these books have a lot of insight into the human mind, and we can see things that we have gone through reflected in that character, and we can perhaps get advice on how they overcame these things, or even just the knowledge that someone else is going through the same thing, I think can be incredibly helpful for quieting the mind. And for reading this sort of books, I would just recommend basically any sort of non-fiction at all, or if you want to go down the academic route, any sort of psychology book. I think a decent psychology book will give you some good experience on learning about your own brain and other people's minds. Third thing that I think school doesn't teach us is how much modern beauty makes us miserable. And this is something that I feel particularly passionate about. It's something that Alain de Botton talks about a lot, but it's basically the point that I think that we, and I'm quite guilty of this too, on social media or in the modern world or in school, in our education, we just glamorize and talk about the things that are already quite fantastical to start with, but are not accessible for most people. And I think then we are left looking at things that surround us and feeling as though they are very mundane, and we find it difficult to look at the beauty in them. While when you read a good descriptive book, you might find that the author goes in an incredible amount of detail about a speck of dew that is on a leaf that is falling outside someone's window, and if the author might even spend a whole page or 2 pages just describing the effect that this has on them. And so it kind of glamorizes the mundane, and it gives you the ability to look at your life and look at the things around you, like a loaf of bread on your counter, like the eyelashes of the crush that you have, and see them in a completely different way, and adds so much beauty and so much layers to the world around us, and not just to those things that we try to make beautiful, to those things that are rare, because I firmly believe that there is so much beauty in absolutely everything. So I think romanticizing the beauty of the world around us in a positive way can elevate our day-to-day experience of the world and give us the ability to see things completely differently. A great book about this, which is really based on this concept, is If No One Speaks of Remarkable Things, which is not one of my favorite books, but I read it because it's quite famous. I don't know how I feel about it, but definitely would recommend Virginia Woolf. To the Lighthouse is a great book where it just describes basically a single day, but it goes into so much detail about everything that happens, and it kind of gives you a completely different perspective and just expands every small thing that you could ever think of in a certain day. And I think it just makes you reappreciate life. Number 4 is that books make it easier for you to learn because they help you let go of your beliefs. I think it was Richard Feynman who said something along the lines of, I have no beliefs because beliefs get in the way of learning. And I'm not sure I would agree with that. I think we all have beliefs, and school, for example, is in the business of giving us beliefs and thoughts about how the world works and how things work. But that does set us in a very rigid mindset. And I don't think that schools do a good job of kind of helping us think outside of the box or question our values or question what we already think. I don't think that this is done very well in school. While when it comes to books, I think books do this very well in a very sneaky way, in the sense that, for example, it is very, very hard for us to accept a new belief if it goes against one of our own. But it's very easy for us to think how someone else might hold a different belief. So in a book, if you're reading about a character who sees the world differently to you, you might not agree with what they're thinking or doing, but you can understand how they would feel that way. So through reading the book, you are putting yourself in the perspective of this person who is completely different, and you are going through the whole book and their whole journey with a completely different mindset. And therefore, I think that you are unintentionally receptive and open to learning new things, taking in new lessons, seeing the world in a different way, in such a form that would be impossible to start with if someone just came up to you and said, hey, you should think this or you should do this. I don't think that you would ever accept this to start with. So I think books help us let go of our beliefs even when we are not realizing it, and therefore I think they make us a lot more open-minded and accepting of other people's perspectives. A book that I would recommend for kind of challenging your beliefs and the way that you see the world is anything by Nietzsche. I think that he's a great philosopher who has some very extreme but interesting views, and it's quite a nice challenge to understand why he sees the world the way he does. And the last thing that I think I'm going to mention that books give us that school doesn't is the understanding of things being rarely discussed but not rare. And what I mean by this is that, for example, we all have deep, dark thoughts or things that we think are just not acceptable, or at least not socially acceptable and not good to think. But I think we can very easily think that these are things that would make us a bad person and that we are alone in feeling this way. I don't think that in school it's a good environment, either just academically or socially, for us to test the groundwaters with who we genuinely are and what we really think. While when you are reading something, it's a very safe space to see that I'm not alone in feeling this way. A great example that I love of this is Proust writing about a young girl who was daydreaming that her whole family would die so that she could have the opportunity to kind of pull herself together, go right back to work and be super strong. So everyone in her village would say, oh my God, that girl just got it together so fast. She's such a strong young lady. And while this girl was daydreaming, the argument of Proust was not that she is an awful psychopath who just hates her family. She does love her family and she does not want them all to die, but she's a human, and therefore she craves social acceptance and she craves being seen as someone who is strong and brave and well put together. And that is what is happening in the story. And I think when Proust said this, I think it was mentioned in many other books as such a good example of people reading this and thinking, oh my God, I've had similar thoughts in my past, and I've definitely had not the exact same thought, but similar thoughts in my past. And I've thought that they were completely terrible when they were younger, and I was never taught that this was acceptable or normal elsewhere, but this is something that I definitely gained from books. So it might be a very extreme case like this, or it might be just another character going through something very unique perhaps that no one else in your life has gone through, and getting through it or accepting it or dealing with it in a better or worse way than you, that makes you realize that what you are going through is rarely discussed, but it's not actually something that happens rarely. Within books, I feel like we can safely peek into the minds of others to discover how beautifully acceptable our thoughts are, rather than completely outrageous in a way that we would not be able to do in real life. The last thing I want to mention in this video is a great way to get the essence of what books mean and the key stories and learning points in them when you have already read the book a long time ago and you cannot afford to go through it again, and that is Shortform, who are very kindly sponsoring this video. Shortform is theoretically a book summaries site, however I do not use it in that way. I use it as a way to kind of refresh my memory on different sorts of books that I have already read before, or to test the waters with new books that people recommend to me. I've been going through Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules of Life on Shortform, the reason being quite a few people in my life very recently have told me that I am judging this book too harshly without having theoretically read it. So I've decided to go through Shortform first, and then potentially I'm going to read the book itself, because apparently it has been very helpful to very many different people, and I did not feel like it was a favorite for me, but let's see. I'll keep you updated on how that goes. There are so many different books and different types of books on Shortform. I would definitely recommend the relationships, the philosophy, and the psychology segments if you are interested in the sort of things that I already mentioned in this video. I will have a link below where you can get free access to Shortform for a limited time, but you can check out one of the books that I mentioned if you are interested in that there. But otherwise, thank you so much for sitting through this video with me. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Be kind to yourself and others, and don't believe everything you think. Thanks. Bye.